Michael, why do you say that talent cannot be taught?
I think talent is something that people just have or they don't. Like if I had a script, a 6-page audition for a television show or a movie, and I gave it to 100 people randomly on the street, a certain number of them would be able to look at it, read it, and kind of make it responsive and somewhat real. And many of them wouldn't. The base level of talent, from my definition, is having great first instincts, because you have to, particularly in film and television, there's not a lot of rehearsal, there's not a lot of time to sort of find your character and all that stuff. So your instincts are, your first instinct, if it's right about 75–80% of the time, that to me is the baseline level of the definition of talent. I don't think you can teach it. You can teach strategy. You can teach people to be better with what talent level they have. But I think talent is just something people have or they don't. And you see it in children. I mean, you see it in little kids. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's how I feel about it.
Can we define instinct?
Sure.
And maybe give an example?
Sure. So when you're, an actor is the slave is too strong a word. The actor is obedient to the text. The text is everything. At least that's how I was taught, and that's how I was trained. And so the instinct is when you look at something very quickly, like if I get an audition for a TV show or a movie, and there's very little time, I look at it quickly and I go, because also I'm seasoned and I've done this a long time. It's not like I'm a 23-year-old anymore. So I can look at it and instantly have a take on how it's supposed to go. For me, it's rhythmical and it's outside in, meaning I work on externals. And I wasn't taught that. In fact, that was oppositional to how I was taught. Inside meaning thinking about it, wondering about it, dredging up some old experience in your life to somehow illuminate it. I work with externals, and so it helps me when you talk about the instinct and having the idea to just look at something quickly. We call that, in the business, they call that a cold read. Like, here's a cold, can you cold read this? In other words, you just look at it and you read it and you have something, or you don't. That's talent and that's instinct. And I kind of don't think that can be taught. I think you either have that or you don't. Training helps that. I mean, when you have good foundational training, it helps that because you are in practice and you're getting better at being able to, you get better faster. Particularly in film and television, you have to get better faster. You have to find a way to short circuit and get to the results faster.
So let's say, you know how they mention that certain people have more street smarts than others, or those in combat, certain people just kind of thrive in those situations. There's something innate in them. Is that similar to being on stage and working with another person in front of you?
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good analogy. It's interesting. I had a woman in the very first class that I taught who was a friend of mine from the voiceover business, and she was not an actor. She was mostly a writer and a really interesting creative person. Highly creative, highly imaginative, funny, but not a trained actor. But she wanted to take this acting class. And she would come in every week with results from the work she was doing outside of class that were weird and interesting and fun and not typical actor stuff. It was off-center a little bit. And I finally said to her, I just want to know, because you really don't have the foundational training that a lot of people have. How do you arrive at that? What is your process? And she said, well, I just pretend that what's happening is happening to me. I went, okay, we can all go home now. That's the lesson. Because that, for film acting in particular, I come from the theater originally, but for film acting, it is a personal identity art form. You are the vessel through which the story flows. I don't know if I answered your question.
You did, yeah. And did she continue on, or she just wanted to be there?
She just did. Well, she did for a while. I think she was in class for maybe a year. She had fun, and it was great for her. And I think it helped. It helped her other work, which was voiceover and writing, because it's all kind of the same. I mean, it's different, it's in different silos, but it's really all the same. It's all the same instinct, it's all the same creative impulse to do something. Look, when you have, like, I have 2 sons who are grown up now and married and all that, but when they were little kids, no one had to teach them to run around the house with a hat on and pretend they were a Power Ranger or whatever it was they were pretending to be. That's just a human hardwired instinct to play and transform. And I don't think that's taught. I think it is. Vogler and I, when I did the interview with Chris Vogler, talked about story also being just sort of hardwired into the species, the hero and all of that. And little kids, you see them doing that. I think with actors in particular, it's getting back to that original impulse to play and transform that makes it, but a lot of stuff gets in the way. I mean, life gets in the way, and how you're raised gets in the way, and the things you've been taught to behave yourself and get in line, and all that stuff gets in the way. And the people where it never got in the way are the people who have an open door. You know, I say that with people. I can help you if the door is open. If the door is closed, I mean, nobody can help you.
So is that why with comedic timing as well, certain stand-ups, let's say Robin Williams, it was like some other being was inside of him.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think it is. I think it is. I think it is. That's a really good question, and I don't really have a nuanced answer for it, but I do think I can remember when I was a little kid making people laugh and not knowing why they were laughing, but I knew how to do it. But I wasn't sure why they were laughing, but I knew how to be funny. Where does that come from? I have no idea. But it was, I told this story yesterday to a student of mine who came by for a session, and I was talking about one of the things. I will not have a second book, but if I ever did have a second book, it would be called Worlds and Faces, because I think that's what TV and film is. It's all about faces and worlds, because everybody at the professional level is pretty talented. So it's not about that. It's about, where do you fit? Where does this fit into that world? SWAT is a world. NCIS is a world. Downton Abbey is a world. They're all different. Where do you fit? It's all about fit. So I told her this story. This comes back to your question about comedic timing. I had an audition for SEINFELD. And I'd never been up for that show, and I always wanted to be on that show because it's such a cool show. It's still a cool show. It's still very funny. And I had this line. First of all, I walked in the room, and Jerry Seinfeld was in the room, which kind of freaked me out. It was exciting, you know, because I love him. I still love him. I think he's brilliant. And I'm working for the New York Mets, and I'm trying to get George to get himself fired so he can come work for the Mets. And my first line is, and it's not, to me, it's not a funny line, but the first line is, George, the Mets need a new head of scouting, and we think that someone might be you. That's the line. It's not really a funny line. I said that line, and Seinfeld almost fell off the chair laughing. And I thought, what just happened here? That's interesting. Somehow I fit in that world. He thought that was funny for whatever reason. I don't know. I can't quantify it, but I think it's just genetic. When you talk about Robin Williams or any of these other brilliant comedic minds, I do think it is kind of just, you know, when you're a little kid, you become the class clown, you become the one who entertains everybody. And if you continue to be crazy enough, you become a stand-up comedian.
And that scene is on your reel, correct?
I think it is, yeah.
It's very funny. You're at the diner.
Yes,
yeah,
the famous
Love
diner.
it.
Yes, yeah.
We'll have a link to your reel down below.
cool.
People
Thank
can
you.
look at it.